Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Dear friends of BRS, the Belgian Raiffeisen Foundation, I wish you all a warm welcome to this edition number 22 of the Microfinance Lunchbreak. Your presence and the diverse audience indicate that these lunch breaks are appreciated, and this is encouraging for us. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you here in persona. Today, we are physically together again, but there is also a live streaming, a one-way communication for the audience outside this room. And you will also be able to review the recording on the BRS website. I had sincerely hoped that this lunch break would have been a festive event, a new spring and a new sound. Unfortunately, we have stumbled seamlessly from one crisis to the next. Today, our thoughts are with all those affected by the merciless war in Ukraine. I especially would like to thank KBC, our valued structural partner of BRS, for its support and generous hospitality for these lunch breaks, next to ADA, Febelfin and Assuralia, our other loyal partners, for their continuous support. Ladies and gentlemen, is microfinance the best way to finance smallholder farmers? The key question of today's session. Although the important role of smallholder farmers in feeding the world is well recognized, the financing of their activities remains a challenge. Not only is it difficult to identify the financial needs and the most appropriate financial mechanisms for this group, it's also a challenge to decide what constitutes the best offering of financing for them and what the relevant terms and conditions should be. During this session, we will look also at the gap between supply and demand. How do we explain the gap and how can we bridge it? How specifically can microfinance institutions, along with other providers of financial services, contribute to bridging this gap? Our panel will discuss this in an interactive way, starting with a sequence of themes illustrated by slides and followed by a Q&A with the audience. Bart Speelman, Program Coordinator, Agrofinance and Cooperative Management at BRS, will act as moderator. I'm pleased to welcome our two renowned panelists for today. Expert in rural development, Dominique Morel has been working for 25 years in NGOs and development cooperation institutions like Enable. With experience in Asia, Latin America, and Africa, she has deepened in the last 4 years her knowledge of farmer organizations' needs and civil society dynamics as manager of Senegal portfolio for the French-speaking NGO SOS Faim. She has also been member of Alterfin's board of directors for 10 years and intervenes regularly for SOS Faim in the Solvay's European Master in Microfinance. Dominique is an agricultural engineer from l'Institut Supérieur Agricole de Beauvais and holds a master's degree in international cooperation and rural development. Our second panelist, Jean-Marc Debricon, has been involved in a number of social impact and non-profit organizations active in the developing world. Since January 2015, he's the general manager of Alterfin, a financial cooperative with a social mission, active in 40 low and low middle-income countries and reaching out to 1 million people. Jean-Marc is the founder of Green Shoots Foundation, a UK charity promoting the transfer of knowledge in Asia. He is the founding director of Children of the Mekong, the UK branch of Enfants du Mekong, a French NGO supporting children and poor communities across Southeast Asia. He was a director of the Research Education Direction Foundation, a UK charity providing long-term medical assistance and training for medical staff treating AIDS patients in Asia and Eastern Europe. Prior to that, Marc was an investment banker for 16 years and served as a portfolio manager for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development and as a managing director in the Global Financial Markets Division of Rabobank International. Jean-Marc holds a master's in business administration and un diplôme d'études supérieures spécialisées in international business from Université Paris 9, Dauphine. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, we have a challenging subject and fascinating speakers. Together with you, I'm looking forward to the presentation and insights and the undoubtedly interesting debate. It's now high time to start, and I gladly give the floor to Bart, Dominique, and Jean-Marc. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Debricon, for this introduction. Well, my name, as has been said, Dominique Morel, and I'm working for SOS Faim, which is an NGO. And we are here really happy with Jean-Marc to share our experience from the field. He's from more banking side field and from more field, really agricultural side. This map just to show you very briefly the experience that we are having with SOS Faim, showing the countries that we are busy with, meaning that we have in these 9 countries more Africa and South America, different kind of partners. The majority of farmer organization partners, so we know quite well what are the needs of the farmers. And we have also financial institutions as partners. So we can see them over there, all kind of financial institutions, classical MFIs, more in Ethiopia or in Congo, more member-based cooperative in West Africa or in South America, and guarantee fund also. So now let me enter in why is actually family farming so important today, because this is the second part of the subject, is microfinance the best way to finance smallholder farms. So I wanted to focus and to insist on why this family farming are so important today. So let me remind you that the figures on rural poverty, on rural area, shows that actually the population still living in rural area is very important. So in some countries like Burkina Faso, like Senegal, or like Ethiopia, we are in numbers like more than 60–70% of the population which is living in this rural area. Well, it's true that in 2010 the balance between urban and rural have been changing. And since 2010, we have more urban population than rural. But in absolute numbers, till 2050, we'll still have an increasing number of people living in rural area due to the growing rate of the population, obviously. This change in different contexts. You see that in South America, for example, is less important than in Africa. Now, rural area is one. In the rural area, we have the farmers. So FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, have been since 10 years putting in front of the international landscape, actually, the family farming as a very important actor. In 2014, there was the year of family farming. 2 years ago, we started the decade of family farming. And we are talking about 500 million of farms, being small farms with 4 or 5 persons, like we know here in Belgium or in France or in Europe, or being farms with 20–25 people working in it in West Africa. So these farmers are actually producing today a big quantity of the food we are eating. Between 50% and 80%, depending on the continent, of the food produced is produced by family farmers. And moreover, they are employing a lot of people, as I said before, and at African and Asian level, this family farming are employing 40% of the population of Africa and Asia. Going maybe to detail, and that was a question in the question we received on what is family farming. The FAO has done an important contribution to try to separate the different model of agriculture that we have today. So family farming is actually the farms where are owned by the family members and where the people of the family are working mostly. So it's exceptional that people are hired from outside. At the opposite of the model, we have the corporate or more agro-industrial model of farming and agriculture activity, which is more corporate, where there we have shareholders, who have the capital, and the people employed in these farms are mostly hired people. So what I like in this sentence that I wanted to tell you from the FAO is the link that they made between the family and the farm. They are linked, they co-evolve, and they combine economic, environmental, social, and cultural functions. And that's what makes family farming really important. Just to give you an idea on what we're talking about, you have all seen this picture from Brazil harvesting soya, or France, big French milk cow production farm, or the tomato in the greenhouse produced in Spain. Now you see some family farming, producing milk with goats, interesting innovation, producing cocoa or coffee plants in agroforestry system, producing onions and fonio, which is local grains in Senegal. So when we see this photo, we can ask ourselves if the family farming are able actually to produce enough food. So thanks to a lot of different panels of international experts, the FAO again, we know actually that the question is not if the family farmer can produce enough food. We know that if they are supported and if they have access to finance, land, and resource, they can do it. But the question is, who is able to produce sustainable food? In the environmental and in the social perspective of the sustainability. So we see the different actors. We know that both, we have the industrial agriculture, and they have access to everything. Actually, we don't have to bother about their access to finance. But the subsistence agriculture, or the family farming, more or less business-oriented, still have a lot of needs and have to evaluate to go to produce enough. So I would end actually this lobbying or advocacy for family farming, just telling you that they are important if we are thinking in terms of poverty alleviation, because you may have heard about the hunger paradox. 60% of the population who is suffering from hunger are farmers. So it's quite important. And they are important if we are thinking in sustainable food system. So with all the challenges that we have in the future with our climate change. So the family farms have actually the potential to adapt and to recover sometimes their techniques and practices that they have before. Obviously with more research, with more input, but they have the potentiality to produce in a more sustainable way and to protect our resources, soil, water, forests, and everything. And we have seen also with the crisis that we have had with the COVID that they have a high potential of resilience because they are mostly much more diversified. Let me finish before giving the word to my colleague Jean-Marc to explain very simply what are the needs of the farmers today in the countries we're working in. So first, they have very short-term needs, loans for seeds, for fertilizers, for animals, capital, just to be able to prepare the campaign. These are short-term loans, not so difficult to find. We are talking about 4 months, 6 months, 8 months. Then they need investment or equipment for more longer term. We are talking about 1, 2, 3, 5 years, indeed. Talking about well, about pump, about animal traction, about green wheel, about storage building, for example. So all this investment, this equipment are needed at the individual level, farms and people being in the farms, yeah, but also at cooperative or group level. Because what is specific to agriculture is that it's a very disseminated sector, and the problem is access to markets. So the farmers have to come together, they have to group themselves, they have to collect their produce, to work on quality, to condition them, even to transform them, and then to sell them. So they also need typical credits at this level, which are obviously higher in amount and maybe longer in term. And that's the last thing, they need these credits on time because rain is not waiting. When it's the moment to sow, it's the moment to sow. To wait later, 2 weeks later is too late. So you just miss your campaign. and they have to be at relative acceptable condition. What I want to say is that agriculture is not a profitable sector in any place of the world. Just ask our farmers also here in Belgium or in France. They are living with salary which are quite low. It's the same thing everywhere, except in some specific niche, that's true. But then the interest rate is actually also an issue. So now I will ask Jean-Marc maybe to quantify from your perspective, social lender, to quantify with more helicopter view actually the financing needs of the smallholder farmers.
Thank you, Dominique. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here. And since we are at KBC Bank, let's look at the money side of things. The quantification of the financing needs of smallholder farmers. Well, a few years ago, that was assessed at about $210 billion in annual disbursements. These were the total financing needs in the various kinds of loans that Dominique highlighted were needed by the farmers. And of these, only 25% were met. And when you look, thank you, Samin, I forgot to click on the button. So when you look at the split in the financing that is provided to the farmers, you'll see that it's mostly short-term loans for the agricultural loans. If you look at the detail of the unmet needs, most of the long-term needs are not financed. This is quite significant because we're talking about capital expenditure. It is not being provided to the farmers. Okay? And when you look at the right section of the slide, here we distinguish between agricultural value chains. And you have tight value chains and loose value chains. In the tight value chains are these commodities, agricultural commodities, that are well formalized, quite liquid, such as coffee and cocoa. In the loose value chains are all the others, slightly more esoteric, and where the financing needs, as you can see, are even less met. Because the difference is that there's half the amount available in financing for loose value chains than there is for tight value chains. So this is quite significant, and I think it gives you an idea of how challenging it is for farmers operating in agricultural value chains others than the traditional coffee and cocoa. Now, if we look at the next slide, this slide is a little bit challenging because when you look at the axis, okay, on the left-hand side, what you see is the size of loans, and it ranges from $10,000 to $5 million loans. And on the right-hand side, you have the nature of the market viewed on the prism of risk factors. Now, this graph introduces the concept of the missing middle. This was defined by Oxfam 7 or 8 years ago, and essentially what it relates to is the funding gap, the absence of financing that is met by small and medium-sized enterprises serving smallholder farmers. And this funding gap is particularly important for loans ranging from $50,000 to $1 million. Now, if we look at the actors who are providing financing to the farmers, you see at the bottom you have microfinance institutions. And they struggle to provide loans to SMEs that are in excess of $20,000 or $30,000. At the top, you have commercial banks, and here we are kind of really talking about the local commercial financial institutions. And they struggle to provide loans to SMEs that are smaller than $1 million. And then in that blue banner, you have the social lenders, and Alterfin is one of them. As you can see, we do provide some financing, but obviously not enough to close the gap. That gap is greater the smaller the loan is, and that gap is also greater the riskier the loan is. So, my next question then is the following, and it's for Dominique. Why is it so difficult to finance farmers?
I put my question with the M between parentheses, because actually the question is not only for microfinance institution, but it's for all finance institution. And because there are quite a lot of different institutions. So we have the basic anchored, embedded in the local area like SACCOs or self-help groups, which are there, who knows very well the population. But we also have this MFIs, starting from urban, but going more and more in the rural, sometimes specialized in rural, but not at all, not all. Then you have the normal bank. In Africa, we see EcoBank, we see Bank of Africa. There's a lot of banks which are settled in the city, but who want more and more to go also to rural. And you have sometimes also national agriculture banks who are there and who are specifically oriented to agriculture. Depending on countries, the situation is really different. But these are all these financial institutions which are there, yeah. And everybody actually is struggling to meet the needs of the farmer. So why? It's quite simple to understand. The farmers are still still in remote area or far. So it is just costly to go there. We don't have to forget that in some place there are still no roads. So it's a cost just to get to a village, just to be able to speak with people. And digitalization can help, but we still need to talk with people the first time we are going to discuss in terms of financial services. So that's the first reason. The second reason is that, as I said, we are talking also about poverty, and that means that in the household there always risk of having need of the money for other things, that agriculture, that your credit reimbursement, that the problem of difficulty to find the market to sell your products. So you've produced something, but you go to the market and the price are like this. So you are at the bad period, you need the money, you're going to sell, but it's not the price you would want to have. We have also the risk of, linked also with poverty, is illiteracy, and we are coming back later on that. There are still a lot of people illiterate, or illiterate of the financial point of view. Means that they know exactly what they're doing. They can explain you how many bags they've put it there and how many charrettes of products they have, but they don't have numbers. So it makes it difficult for an external financial institution to understand actually the real business, how it goes, and if it's profitable or not. And that's what we call asymmetry of information in the banking language. But this is really still existing and make the life of financial institution difficult. Also, we are talking about agriculture. Agriculture depends on climate, on the weather. We all know that, and it makes it's making more risky. So these are objective risk linked to agriculture, which are for everybody. And obviously the political risk. We see now we've seen the impact of COVID on all the supply chain and changing price and impeding people to sell their products. We see also now the impact of the Ukraine war with improving price of grain everywhere and of bread everywhere. So this are also risk to the farming sector, and now it's difficult for the financial institution to mitigate this risk actually. So to get third party who would like to share the risk with them, or to get insurance, even if there are some interesting experience like this. So these are all the reasons. But I would like not to be so negative also. The microfinance institutions have done quite a lot in the last 15 years. And I will give just now an example. They have grown a lot. They are going in a lot of parts, the penetration rate that they have is increasing. They have been doing a great work with women, giving them the way to empower themselves, to all these small loans that you know, and this group's credit system, which still exists. And they have made a lot of efforts to diversify their product. But obviously, they have limits today. And the first limit, I was saying before, is the rate, is the cost of the money. They're still expensive. In a lot of countries, we're talking about 15, 18, 20, 24%. So which activity can support such a high rate of interest? They are focused still on short-term loans. And they are still with small amount and not being able, we hear quite a lot of farmers' organizations we're working with that they ask a 100 million francs CFA credit to buy grains and they just receive the half. So, okay, it's there, but it's not completed. So just give me the opportunity to give you an example of this kind of MFIs doing a lot in the rural sector and trying to innovate and trying to adapt their product. So UIMSEC in Senegal, 9 offices in all the country, 18 million euro portfolio, which is not so big, but which is already something. They want to have a project of an agriculture finance center, so they want to develop their expertise in agriculture, and they have been doing trials of different new products, sometimes with help of NGOs or program. I know that Terrafina was involved in that. So trials in a warrantage. So storage credit with platform to help the buyers knowing what is in the store actually and to be able to buy the grains. They are also trying some solar panel investments, so more green credits oriented. But for example, you see here 2 credits they have, the credit campaign, so agriculture campaign 1, women group 2. They have 13 credits. On the 13 credits, 7 are for agriculture, which is quite important. But just 1 is more than 12 months. And 1 is more than 20,000 euro. All the rest is shorter period and shorter amount. So that illustrates also the limit actually of microfinance in agriculture. And with this nice drawing, which illustrates also sometimes the way that microfinance institutions are criticized to also put more the financial focus first. I will give the word back to Jean-Marc to explain us actually how the social lenders, because Alterfin is not the only social lenders, there are a group of social lenders interested in agriculture, so how you are organizing yourself to meet actually the needs of the farmers.
Thank you, Dominique. So, Alterfin is one of social lenders, and if you want a brief definition of what is a social lender, I think you could look at the fact that for us, the social and environmental mission primes over the financial mission. Now, about 10 years ago, a group of us, 7 at the time, gathered and decided to set up CSAF, the Council for Smallholder Agricultural Finance. The purpose of CSAF was to establish guiding principles, responsible lending principles, to define best practice standards, not just for us, but for the whole sector of agri-financing, and to help promote that sector and try, in a way, to tackle the financing we do not provide, rather than just compete between ourselves in the financing that we do provide. And as you saw from the previous slides, 75% of those financing needs are not met. So there's a lot of work that we have to do. Now, CSAF today is about 12 global members, about 10 affiliates and about 10 field building partners. Together, we represent about $750 million in annual disbursements to agriculture, which, as you can appreciate, and based on the numbers I gave you before, is just a drop in the ocean. However, it's an important drop because what we've also done was to compile data and share it with the rest of the sector. So every year we have a state of the sector report, which we share, and I would invite you to consult the csaf.org website to check this year's report. And in 2018, we mandated Dalberg to compile the data from all 12 members, and we're talking about just under 4,000 loans, to look at all our costs and to define what the average loan looked like and whether it was profitable or not. And the verdict is that the average loan is about $665,000, and once you look at the revenues produced by this loan and you cost in all the expenses to service that loan, the currency losses, the credit losses, the recovery management costs, etc., and you account for the cost of capital, you realize that your average loan is in negative return territory. Oops. So, what does that tell you? Well, it explains why this financing gap, this missing middle, is so important. And if we look again at the prism of risk factors, if your loan is in sub-Saharan Africa rather than in the rest of the world, if your loan is to a new borrower rather than an established recurring borrower, and if your loan is in a loose value chain rather than a tight value chain, then you're really in trouble, okay? That's the column on the right where you have all these risk factors highlighted in pink. You can see at the very bottom of the slide that the portfolio of loans of this group of lenders is massively concentrated on the left-hand side, where it's green. You have 1,500 loans representing 43% of the portfolio that are on these borrowers, and only 188 loans representing a mere 5% of the portfolio that are in the riskiest loans. And of course, the riskier the loan, the smaller it is. So it's a kind of a vicious circle. What do we do to break that circle? Well, one of the solutions that we engineered as social lenders was to set up Aseli Africa. And Aseli Africa is a platform financed by USAID, IKEA Foundation, the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and others, to provide financial incentives to lenders like Alterfin and the other members of CSAF, but not only. And this in the form of a first loss subsidy, but also an origination subsidy. And this is meant to incentivize us to make the riskiest loans possible. So there is a degree of range of those subsidies. The smaller the loan, the greater the subsidy. The riskier the loan and the profile of the borrower, the greater the subsidy. And these subsidies are not just open to members of CSAF, but also to other members. And by that, I mean also local financial institutions, including microfinance institutions. So this platform that was originally set up by social lenders is accessible to other actors. And it's meant to convince us that we should reduce that gap. So for Alterfin, what was the impact? Well, in 2020, we made 8 loans to smallholder farmers, SMEs and cooperatives in Rwanda, the total of which was $1.5 million. 8 loans, $1.5 million. Your average loan is about $125,000. I think you can all appreciate that a loan that small costs you more money. I mean, just the cost of due diligence will eat all the profits. However, with the intervention of the subsidies, the economics change. And that bought us time. Those loans were renewed in 2021, and we're renewing them again in 2022. And none of them, not a single one of them, defaulted, okay? Even though they were risky, and these were relatively small partners. So I think it serves as a lesson that it is possible to do something and to do it in an effective way. But now, social lenders also are active indirectly, financing farmers indirectly, and that is through microfinance institutions. Now here we have an essential role to play. First, by providing what I would call responsible financing. And by responsible financing is the financing that is needed at the time when it's needed, but that is not also overburdening the microfinance institution. The last thing you want to do is increase the burden of liabilities on their shoulders. You have to provide them financing when it suits their asset liability management the best. You also have to do it in local currency. If we want to be responsible, we cannot expose them to hard currency risk. And I'm sure you can appreciate with the events in Ukraine, there's a lot of volatility on the currencies. And that means that some of the borrowers who have liabilities expressed in dollars or euros are really struggling because their local currencies may depreciate by 10, 15, 30%, but the liabilities are still in a hard currency. So it's going to cost them so much more to pay it back. So it's important as lenders that we ensure we provide them with hedges and other tools that will secure them from these kinds of risks. Another thing which is important is not just to focus on tier 1 microfinance institutions that have an amazing reach, but also look at tier 2, tier 3, and more rural organizations. And these, they usually struggle to find a lot of lenders. So it's important to reach out to these ones as well, even though it's a little bit more challenging. For all the institutions that you lend money to, when you perform your due diligence, you will identify weaknesses. And it's important to work together with other actors, NGOs, such as SOS Faim and others, in providing them with the technical assistance that is needed to help them address these weaknesses. And of course, in times of crisis, the responsible thing to do is to be patient and to be constructive in the way you handle the issues caused by this crisis. COVID is the prime example of it. And I think here it was very important that all lenders really looked at things together, displayed patience, and that meant awarding grace period extensions when needed, or even work on extensive restructuring where needed. That is absolutely paramount. Last but not least, the digitalization process. We received a lot of questions about fintech, the fintech revolution, and we'll probably spend a bit more time in the Q&A to address that. But digitalization is essential in the sense that it can help microfinance institutions reduce the costs of reaching out to farmers. Dominique highlighted in the presentations how expensive and difficult it is to reach out to farmers. So by cutting down on the operational costs, microfinance institutions can make it possible to reach out to farmers. Again, here we're looking at the economics. Just like altering the economics for the social lenders help them make decisions to provide financing to farmers, SMEs, here the same applies to microfinance institutions. Now, I take back the slide that you saw earlier on. And here are just two, let's say, proposed solutions for reducing that gap. Risk mitigation is one that should help those actors at the top of the slide, i.e. commercial banks and social lenders, help them making smaller loans. And for microfinance institutions, we are looking at various initiatives, such as fintech solutions, to decrease the cost of their operations and help them reach out to more farmers' SMEs. These are important because they will help us reduce that gap. But we have to be aware of the fact that this gap will still exist, and we constantly need to use ever changing tools to address them and do this together. And now I'm going to hand over back to Dominique and ask you what is also done for microfinance institutions to help farmers, other initiatives than just the ones I've highlighted.
Yeah, okay. So what we can do, he proposed solutions from the social lenders, so the second level perspective. As NGO, what can we do also to help actually microfinance institution to increase their services? So the first thing is that you talked about it, but digitalization. So we can help them to finance their digitalization process, and that's what we're doing with a few partners of us. Then we can also help them to adapt their credit. I talked about UIMSEC and this Senegalese, so it has been through a process like this, 3-4 years, trying to talk with a farmer organization to understand better their needs, and then to design products which are adapted to their needs at individual level or at group or cooperative level. So that's things that we can do as NGO in the sector. We also can promote, and there is a lot to do, to promote more greener products. And that's a point of interrogation, because there are microfinance saying, well, is that our job to see if the production system is good or not, if they're using fertilizer or not, and if they're, do we have to care? My answer is yes, microfinance has to care. It comes from a very social and vision of inclusion for financial services, or try to get everybody on board. And now getting everybody on board is not enough. We also have to care about doing finance in a green way, in a way which is not harming our environment. So here is still a lot to do to sensibilize also the financial institution on maybe they can change interest rate for more organic production compared with classical production. That's an easy way to do, but there are few doing that, so still a lot to do. Another thing that we can do is help to partner, because MFIs, you understood, they cannot answer all the needs. So they have to partner with other actors, with banks, traditional banks, with government. And for example, with government, I would like to highlight the problem of literacy, of financial literacy. In Burkina Faso and in Republic of Congo, there are now national programs or national funds for microfinance to help microfinance to give this program of financial literacy to their farmers' client. So this is an interesting partnership. Also partnership with government and with bank to try to improve the question of the insurance. In our system here, if there's a disaster, the governments are helping to step the gap, to close the gap where there's a big disaster, yeah, for farmers, where the harvests are just, we have to think about the wine producers in France, for example, and there's a lot of cases like this. But in the country we're working is, they're not having a lot of budget. They're even not reaching the 10% of the budget that they would have to put in agriculture, that they engage 15 years ago. So it's difficult. There's still a lot to do in this trying to make partnership. The last kind of partnership that I wanted to focus is guarantee funds. Guarantee funds are working. We have an example of this guarantee fund in South America, which has been working now for 20 years, working at both levels, actually helping MFIs to get credits to social lenders, giving guarantee, so having a leverage effect, or helping the farmers' organization to get a loan from their local financial institution. And this guarantee fund is there, sharing the risk, as I explained in the beginning. So, I guess we're just going to close here and to let the floor and to have this question and answer. Thank you very much, actually, for your attention.
Thank you, Dominique and Jean-Marc, for the interesting discussion and the interesting insights that you gave. So, as usual, we now give the opportunity to the public to ask some questions. And I see that immediately there is someone in front here who wants to ask a question. Maybe if a colleague of mine can come with the microphone.
Thank you. Dominique, Jean-Marc, thank you very much for this excellent presentation. I was actually very impressed by your graph and about the missing funds, the missing link. It's obvious that it's not easy to find funds for small organizations. And I see you have social lenders, you have microcredit lenders. I was wondering in how far you also envisage more traditional sources of finance, like philanthropic grants, and maybe also what is now even more popular, venture philanthropy, in order to fill that gap. If you have some experience with that, either Dominique or you, yourself, Jean-Marc, thank you very much. So I don't know if I presented me, but I am Jacques Boucher and I'm a philanthropy advisor. So.
Thank you very much. It's an excellent question, and I think what's important is to look at it. All these actors that you have seen on those graphs, basically, who are not providing the financing that they need, they are part of an ecosystem, and we all have to work together. And I think what we have to realize is even among the social lenders, you have differentiations. So you have lenders such as Alterfin or Root Capital or Shared Interest, and we typically cater for loans that will be between 100,000 and, let's say, 500,000. The average loan at Alterfin is about 350,000. Now, you have other lenders, such as Triodos or Responsability. They are larger. Okay, they have access to more funds, and they will provide loans in excess of 1.5 to 2 million. Okay, what that means is that at some stage in the evolution, the growth of the partners that we work with, we will see that they get ready to the next step. They will get ready, they will have needs for more money, and money that maybe we will not be able to provide. Okay? And then that relationship then will start with other larger lenders, such as Responsability, for instance. But the same is true for the transition from us, to us. We are basically in need of players such as yourself to provide the initial seed capital and get them started, because we will only look at them after they have already a few years, let's say, of accounts, and they have a minimum of turnover and a minimum size of balance sheet. So we're all part of the same ecosystem where we need to work together, be aware of who's who, who's doing what, and how we can facilitate each other's tasks in bringing our partners to sustainable, manageable, responsible growth, because that's the most important. Mm-hmm. The worst thing we could do for these farmers is provide them too much money too early. And that would be criminal. And we have seen it sometimes. We've had disaster stories because too many of us competed in provide a lot of money. That was wrong. So I think we have to provide money where it's needed, but we also have to restrain ourselves, restrain our enthusiasm in providing too much money.
Maybe I would like to add the experience of company that you may have heard here in Belgium, which pulled money from different foundations, family foundation, but also Koning Boudewijn Stichting, and also different NGOs who have pulled again together money, and they're focused on financing equity, so capital for farmers' organization who have their business, or SMEs, and or long-term credit. So this is a very interesting initiative, actually. Which give an answer to some needs. But then, again, it's maybe contradictory what I said, but this initiative are really interesting, we need that, but at the same time, companies now few years working, 5-6 years working, and they have, it's not easy to find good project. So at the field level, to find good organization with a good governance, with a good level of management, with a good access to market, to be able to recover this money. So the risk also here is quite big. But that's where philanthropy and foundation have a role to play, that's for sure.
Okay, are there other questions from the public here in the room? Yes, Mark.
I'm Mark Boutmans and I volunteer for BRS. If I understand the Rwandan case well, it is a matter of reducing your top cost so that it can trickle through to your bottom cost. And out of the bottom cost lowering, you have the moral benefit of repayment. Is that correct?
That's right. If you want, I can run you through the economics. Yeah. Okay.
So does it mean that you, and in general all the investment funds, does it mean that you in future may look more towards those that what you call subsidize you, in a sense insure you against losses? Is that the trick to come to a phenomenon that we all have in MFIs, which is their operating cost is too high and it gets transferred to the borrowers, who then, of course, have too high cost to repay?
Yes, actually. So what's important to look at is these organizations, so these cooperatives of farmers in Rwanda, are not getting the money from local microfinance institutions because the loans they ask for are too big for these MFIs. So these MFIs would not be able to provide $100,000 or $125,000. Okay. But when they look at us, when they look at local banks will say, no, below 1 million, forget about it. Even for us, we are struggling. So let's take $100,000 for a working capital that, let's say, we charge 10% for it, okay? But it only lasts for 6 months, okay? So that's $5,000 of revenues. The due diligence cost is probably $4,000. The cost of financing your dollars is probably $3,000, so you're already negative 2, okay? And that's assuming they pay you back in time. So you can see why the average loan actually is in negative territory. Now, if, let's say, we get a first loss subsidy that will help us from a kind of economical capital point of view, if we get an origination incentive, that will basically take care of some of the due diligence costs. And all of a sudden, this negative territory return is no longer true. We are now in positive territory. In an investment committee, this can make a difference between a yes and a no. Okay? And what's more important is the mechanism of this first loss. Whilst it is provided on a deal-by-deal basis, and it's deal specific, it remains on an escrow account, okay? And you do not touch it until there is a loss. But what it means is cumulative. So after a while, let's say, it becomes a portfolio first loss, which is really an incentive for you to do more. And I think that's actually a very smart way, and a very smart way of using money in an efficient way. For microfinance institutions, they will have to build up their capabilities to try and provide more and more financing in a more effective way to the farmers. But if you remember well, these are SMEs, okay? So we are targeting the SMEs or the cooperatives that gather these smallholder farmers together. The microfinance institutions themselves, they will target the individual farmers. So it's a slightly different stories. But if they can reach out to them in a more effective way and reduce their costs, the issue will be the same as for us. Eventually, the decision might be a positive decision to provide a credit to these farmers. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Is it working? Yeah. Which brings me to a second part of the question is, and Dominique mentioned it, where would be the borderline between extending a loan and extending equity? Because equity is an answer to the long-term demand. A loan is typically an answer to the short-term demand. Where in your minds would you see the borderline?
I can provide some answer and then I'll hand over to Dominique. For us, it starts with building a relationship, okay? So what we try to do first is to build up a track record, a history with a partner. And it usually starts with short-term credit, so working capital. Once you have that history and you have a better grasp of their needs, and what it means also, every year you have a due diligence visit, so you can check again if the weaknesses that you identified in the first year have improved or not. And then you can truly assess their long-term needs. And so capital expenditures can be investigated. And we can then check whether we are the best place to provide it, or if we can find partners that are specifically designed for that, such as Campani, for instance. And there are others as well. So that's actually one way of proceeding. But what it means is you really have to be acquainted with your borrowers and getting to know them better.
I would say from the point of view of the farmers, and obviously at the individual level we're talking about loans. That's for sure. Equity has no use. Equity could have use indeed for bigger organization, for bigger cooperative who really want to have to partner actually with someone who's going to put some capital in the business, transforming cocoa, coffee, or whatever product, and then it has a useful equity can be interesting. But I would say first now, and what I was saying also in my presentation, this medium term, not so expensive equipment that they need for 3, 4, maybe 5 years investment. This is the major need today. So I would say, from my point of view, there's more needs for loans is we globally seen. Even if in some time it can be interesting to have equity also. Yeah.
Okay. There's one more question over there.
I'm Johan Cottony, Exchange. You mentioned the gap for the middle category of lenders. We at Exchange, we also see there is a gap, in a geographical gap. It's very easy to find loans for support for Rwanda, Senegal, Latin America. But countries like Malawi, where in terms of Dominique's introduction, over 50% of the farmers are smallholders with very low labor intensity and so forth. So couldn't the labor division between your groups, the Alterfins of this world, not help to also relieve this geographical gap that exists?
That's for you.
Okay. Well, the answer is yes, but obviously we have limited resources as well, okay? So as a cooperative, we have about, let's say, we're getting close to 70 million euros of capital. We have a slight leverage, which helps us to kind of, let's say, we have a balance sheet of about 125 million euros. And as I said earlier, our average loan is 350,000. And we work with just about 160 active partners, half of them in microfinance and half of them in agriculture, and more than 30 countries. But what that means, even though it's quite spread out, is that we are limited in what we can do, and every new country we really have truly appreciate whether we are capable of delivering. Okay, whether we are capable of providing financing not just for 1 year, but basically to build it up. And we are looking then at build up a portfolio, traditionally because financing microfinance institutions, let's say, is easier than financing directly farmers. You usually start with that. So you build up, let's say, a few loans to microfinance institutions, and then you find agriculture partners, SMEs or cooperatives that you can finance. And together you build a small portfolio that should be sustainable at the country level itself. Of course, some countries will perform differently than others. You have some countries that are riskier than others. If we take Latin America, for instance, one country which is absolutely amazing from a social and environmental point of view is Bolivia. Mm-hmm. But it is very risky, okay? And I think, you know, for you then what's important is to look at the portfolio level. You then start managing your assets in a way that you have activities in countries where things are a little bit safer, that allow you to be active in other countries where things are not as safe. So it's a balancing way. And that's what you have to do at the global level in order to continue to expand yourself in a sustainable way. Because at the end of the day, you know, we have to preserve the capital of the members of our cooperative, and we also want to deliver a dividend to them. Modest, but nevertheless a dividend, which is the illustration that our model is a sustainable model also from a financial point of view.
I just hear some call for you to work in Malawi, so just analyze the demand.
I think that was clear.
Yeah, there's a last question over there, and then I think we need to wrap up.
Yes, hello. My name is Johan Elsen, Managing Director of Oikocredit Belgium. Thank you very much for the very clear presentation. One of the elements, or one element I missed, and it touches the last things you said. We all, as social lenders here in Belgium or in the north in Europe, most of us are offering one single product to the individual social investors here in Belgium, the members of our cooperatives. And the history is that it comes from microfinance, lending to microfinance institutions or financing microfinancing institutions. Isn't it necessary also, in order to close this gap, that we have a diversification of product offering to our investors and perhaps also offer new products targeting SMEs with a higher risk appetite, for instance? Isn't that something we should envisage too?
I will just answer first as investor in Alterfin or as investor in ethical or alternative way of putting our money. I really agree with you that you guys, Alterfin, Oikocredit, all the social lenders have to come more to public to say we are doing interesting things with vision. We are closing these gaps. We are financing people who need. So invest in our cooperative, in our institutions. The traditional bank are trying to come to this market now, is coming with the more ethical funds and everything, but you are much more ethical and much more advanced in that. So I would say, yes, come with more offer of products for saving products, actually for us, investing products for all of us. And I'm sure that more and more people are going to support that. But that's from my point of view of investor, actually.
No, you're right, Dominique. And, you know, I mean, Oikocredit is also, you know, a well-established cooperative. And like Alterfin, we've been working for a long time in all these countries of operations and often case together in good times and also in bad times. But let's face it, when you're talking about impact investing, what is coming through right now is that with climate change, with the finally the realization that yes, climate change is real and it's happening faster than what we anticipate. And again, there's going to be an acceleration soon. So money managers are finally getting the story as well. And they are changing basically their strategic view. And now they're getting into impact investing. And it's both, I think, it's a blessing because I think it's important, but at the same time, you know, we're going to have to be careful of how it's being done because it's a lot of money coming in, and usually it's going to go for the low-hanging fruits, and it's going to slightly distort some of the rules. And you know, some of the threats that I mentioned before, providing too much money, overburden organizations with money, it is going to happen because there's going to be too much new money coming in. Is there a room for the Oikocredit, Alterfin, and other social lenders of this world to work on a different kind of instrument to attract money, rather, I mean, outside the cooperative way? Probably, yes. Should we be doing it? Yes. Should we be doing it together? Definitely, we should. I think this is something we'll have to be working on together in the coming years, especially if we want our way of dealing with partners to prime over what could come.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that was the last question from the public. And before inviting you all to the lunch that is always presented to us, I want to thank again the speakers for their insights that they gave us. Also, I want to thank you, the public who was present here in Brussels, and also the public that attended via the live stream. And I wanted to thank also the colleagues from the audiovisual department for facilitating everything and to have it to have everything go smoothly as it has always been. And of course, we also have a present to thank our speakers. So I'll just go behind the curtain and take the presents. There we are. There you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's fair trade produce.
Yeah, obviously.
Thank you.